A long time ago, in a small town near New Orleans, there lived a wealthy man named Richard Williams. He owned a thriving business in fine silk fabrics. Being his father's only child, he inherited the entire business and fortune when his father passed away. Under Richard's management, the business flourished so much that his fabrics were not only sold in New York and Chicago, but also shipped through his trade partners as far as Europe and South America. His wealth multiplied day by day. Soon he became one of the richest men in the region. His name was well known everywhere. In New Orleans, he built a mansion that looked like a palace, filled with every luxury imaginable. Servants and maids were always at his service. In short, he lived a lavish, prosperous life. After some time, Richard married a kind and well-mannered woman named Princess Elizabeth. At first, their life together was peaceful, but gradually, Elizabeth began to notice Richard's many bad habits. She tolerated most of them, except one. Richard had an intense hatred for daughters. Perhaps he had inherited this mindset from his father. Being the only son, he had grown up spoiled and entitled. And like his father, he believed sons were the pride of a family. Sons could run businesses, earn wealth, and carry on the family name. Daughters, he thought, were a burden, a waste of money, a possible source of shame and an insult to his masculinity. Elizabeth knew of his cruel belief, but she remained silent. She feared his anger and wanted to keep her husband happy. Richard, meanwhile, longed for children, but he was clear he wanted only a son. Some time later, Elizabeth became pregnant. Richard was overjoyed, but soon after he became worried. He told his wife, "Tomorrow I leave for New York on the longest business journey of my life. It may bring great profit, but it will take me a long time to return. Before I go, hear me well. If you give birth to a son, raise him like a prince. But if it is a daughter, bury her before she grows up to disgrace us. It's better to end her story at birth." Elizabeth's heart shattered at these words. She silently cried but didn't argue. Richard left with his business partners for New York, leaving behind a frightened, heartbroken wife. Elizabeth turned to prayer. Day and night she prayed for a son, hoping to escape her husband's cruelty. But as the saying goes, there is a human will and there is God's will. And in the end, only God's will prevails. Months passed and the day came. Elizabeth gave birth to a beautiful baby girl. Holding her daughter filled her with joy. But fear soon returned as she remembered Richard's command. No mother could kill her own child. So Elizabeth made a vow. She would raise her daughter with love, no matter what her husband might do. The first word she taught her baby girl was Daddy, the name of the man who despised daughters. 2 years later, a letter arrived. Richard was returning home. Elizabeth grew anxious. How would he react when he saw a daughter instead of the son he expected? Richard, convinced that he had a son waiting for him, had bought lavish gifts from New York. He returned home full of pride and joy. When he entered his house, he called out loudly, "Bring me my son at once." Elizabeth came forward, greeted him, and then their little girl toddled out. Calling, "Daddy, Daddy!" Richard's joy turned to rage. His hands dropped the gifts to the floor. He shouted, "I asked for a son, and you dared to disobey me? You kept a daughter alive? Now I'll do what you could not." Elizabeth wept and begged him not to commit such a crime. But Richard stormed out of the house with the little girl in his arms. He walked into the woods outside town, dug a pit and placed his daughter inside. Just then a wandering preacher passed by. Shocked by what he saw, the preacher shouted, "Stop, foolish man! What are you doing? This child is God's gift, His trust placed in your care. To kill her is a grave sin. Daughters are blessings, not curses. Don't live in the darkness of ignorance." Richard froze. Something in his heart softened. He stopped, pulled his daughter out and carried her home. Elizabeth, crying with relief, kissed her daughter's hands and feet. Though Richard spared her life, his hatred for daughters remained. He never showed her love. He mocked her, insulted Elizabeth, and filled the house with bitterness. Elizabeth, patient and faithful, raised her daughter with love. She taught her to forgive, to pray, and never to hate her father. Years passed. The girl grew older, but Elizabeth's health declined. On her deathbed, she embraced her daughter and whispered, "My child, my time has come. Promise me, no matter what your father has done, never hate him. Always remain kind. Leave the rest to God." With those words, Elizabeth passed away. The daughter wept bitterly. Neighbors came to help, and Elizabeth was buried that evening. Richard showed no sorrow. A few days later, he remarried. The daughter, now motherless, lived in silence. Richard never allowed her to marry, fearing dishonor. Though wealthy, he never bought her new clothes, leaving her to wear her late mother's old garments. She prayed, worked, and endured. Years later, Richard's new wife bore him 2 sons. They grew up and took over his business. Richard aged, fell ill, and soon developed leprosy. His wife neglected him, caring only for his wealth. His sons, greedy for property, divided his fortune and abandoned him. The man who once lived in luxury now lived in misery. Finally, his wife and sons cast him out of the house, fearing his disease. The only one who remained was his daughter, the same daughter he once tried to bury. She carried him to a hut in the woods and cared for him. Richard, broken and ashamed, wept, "My daughter, I wronged you and your mother. I am suffering for my sins. Please forgive me." His daughter forgave him. She even took him to her mother's grave, so he could ask forgiveness there too. Later, Richard went to court with her and sued his sons, demanding her rightful inheritance. The judge ruled in her favor, forcing his sons to return the old family home to her. Richard then declared, "My sons have betrayed me, but this one daughter whom I despised is dearer to me than both of them. They abandoned me, but she stood by me." Richard spent his final years under his daughter's care. Eventually, he arranged her marriage to a kind young man named Michael. Wanting never to be separated from her, Richard brought Michael to live in the same house. In time, death came for Richard. His story ended, but the lesson remained. The moral. Friends, the greatest lesson in this story is that there should be no difference between sons and daughters. Daughters are not a burden. They are blessings, companions, and lights in their parents' lives. Sons may divide wealth, but daughters often remain faithful in hardship. This story teaches us that prejudice blinds the heart, while love and kindness bring true light. Even if realization comes late, repentance and change are still possible.